Hi there, my name is Sanad. I'm a Senior Software Engineer in Test at GitLab. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to write the orchestration for an end-to-end test using the GitLab QA framework. This is the second video in a two-part series on the orchestrated tests. Let's get started. While recording this video, I've made some assumptions. I'm assuming that the viewers have some knowledge of the GitLab QA framework, some basic understanding of how to write the end-to-end tests, and an understanding of what an orchestrated test is, its components, the test scenarios, and how to run the orchestrated test. Now, we learned about this third bullet point in the first part of this two-part series. If you are looking to gain that information, please do go ahead and watch the first part video. I pasted a link over here. And if you are looking for information on how to write end-to-end tests, I've also added some links on this slide. The first link talks about where to start. In the second link, we have a step-by-step tutorial that guides you through how to write an end-to-end test. Here's a list of what we are going to learn in this video. We're going to start off with an existing end-to-end test written in the GitLab project that runs fine on the local environment, but it is dependent on an external service. In the first step, we are going to manually run the external service in a Docker container, but our ultimate goal would be to automate the orchestration of this service using the GitLab QA framework, and we're going to start doing that in step 2, where we are going to write a component for this external service, and we're going to use that component in a test scenario. We're also going to add some documentation for the new scenario and any required environment variables. There would be a slight modification required to the existing tests that we started off with in step 1 to work with the new test scenario. We're going to do that in step 3. In step 4, we are going to see how to use the test scenario we wrote in step 2 to run the tests on local. In step 5, we are going to learn how to run the test scenario on CI before the MRs are merged. Next, we are going to learn about how to release a new version of GitLab QA gem after the GitLab QA MR is merged. We're then going to move up to talking about the different places where we need to add the environment variables that we created in step 2. Last, we're going to speak about the different pipelines where we need to add new jobs for running the new test scenario that we created. As I mentioned in the last slide, our first step is to create a test in the GitLab project, manually run the service, and ensure that the test is passing. We have that test in this branch. I have also pushed this branch in a fork of the GitLab project, just in case the branch in the GitLab project gets deleted. Start with running the GTK and manually run the service in the container using this command, and then run the test with this command. Now let's see the test running. I have the GTK up and running here, and in the second tab, I'm going to start the Docker container. In the third tab, I'm going to run the tests. Now you notice that I don't have the username and password environment variables set here. I've already exported them, so I'm not going to set them again. This is a lengthy test, so I'm going to pause here for a bit, and I'll come back when the test is actually passed. And here we go. We have a green test. We'll briefly look at the code. Now, I am not going to go into the details of the test implementation. You can easily tell by looking at the code that this test is ensuring that we can close an issue in Jira while pushing a commit in GitLab, and ensuring we can close an issue in Jira via a merge request in GitLab. One other thing I would like to point out here is that currently we have hard-coded the service URL to localhost 8080. This is because we have manually run the service on that URL and port. This will need to change later when we have the GitLab QA orchestrate the service for us. Now we are going to move to the GitLab QA project to write the orchestration code. This involves creating a new component for the external service, and also we'll be creating a new test scenario that would use this component along with the GitLab component and the component that would run the test. We'll also be adding any required environment variables to the runtime env file. And so all these changes that we're going to do to GitLab QA project are already pushed to this branch here. And I also have this branch pushed to a fork of the GitLab QA project just in case that this branch on the canonical GitLab QA project gets deleted. We're also going to make some minor changes to our GitLab MR. Remember I mentioned that we have currently localhost 8080 hard-coded, but now what we're going to do is that we are going to pass it on from the GitLab QA. Also, the final version of the GitLab MR has been pushed to this branch. Again, this branch is available on a fork of the canonical GitLab project over here. Let's look at the code. As I mentioned, the first file that we need to create is the component. This component goes in lib gitlab qa component directory. We named our component as Jira since this component is supposed to spin up a container in which Jira application would be running. We have mentioned the image here, and the most important part of this code is the instance method. This instance method would be called by the test scenario that we are going to write next. Inside the instance method, we call prepare that pulls the Docker image and creates the network and then starts the Docker image. I would also like to point out here that we are setting the host name to an environment variable called Jira hostname, and we will also need to add this new environment variable inside the env file. This file is located in lib gitlab qa runtime directory. The three variables that we are supposed to add here: Jira hostname, Jira admin username, and Jira password. Jira hostname would be set by the test scenario, and Jira admin hostname and Jira admin password would be set as the CI/CD environment variables on the pipelines. Next, we need to create the test scenario. In this test scenario, we would be using the Jira component that we created earlier, and as I mentioned earlier, the instance method is what we would be calling inside the test scenario. This test scenario also spins up the GitLab container and another container to run the specs. One thing to note here is that we are going to run the test instance all test scenario in the GitLab project, and we are going to pass the Jira tag as our spec arguments. This will ensure that we are only running those tests that have the Jira meta. As I had mentioned earlier, we need to make a minor change to our GitLab MR, and that change is using the Jira home environment variable set inside the component instead of using the hard-coded localhost environment variable. Now, when the Jira hostname environment variable is provided, we'll be using that, else we'll fall back to localhost. In the GitLab QA project, in the GitLab ci.yml file, we need to create new jobs for this scenario we just created. We need to add a job each for CE and EE and the corresponding quarantine jobs. Next, we are going to talk about how to run the test scenario we just created on local inside Docker using GitLab QA. Now, the command to do that is this one right here mentioned at the bottom of the slide. I'll copy it, and I'm in the root of the folder where the GitLab QA project has been checked out. What this command is going to do is it will try to run test integration Jira against this GitLab image. It will try to find the GitLab image on local, and if it doesn't find it there, it will exit. It will not try to pull it from the registry because we have explicitly mentioned here to skip pull. And obviously the reason for skipping pull is that we have made up this test Jira tag ourselves. It does not exist in the registry. Now that obviously means we have to ensure that we have an image with this name and this tag on our local. We can do that by pulling a GitLab image from the registry and then retagging it. One point that I would like to mention here is that if your GitLab MR has made changes to the application code, such as adding a selector to a view, pulling just any GitLab image won't work, as you would need your changes in the GitLab image. In this case, you would need to pull and retag the GitLab image created by the trigger GitLab Docker job, triggered downstream by the package and QA job. For example, in one of my MRs, I have the package and QA job finished successfully. I would need to go to this pipeline that was triggered from the package and QA job, and then go to trigger GitLab Docker job, and scroll all the way down, and then here I would find the image that was created. Now this image would have all the changes that I made to the application code. Now this command will also try to look for the GitLab QA image with the same tag as the GitLab image. As opposed to the GitLab image, we can create the GitLab QA image locally. This GitLab QA image will contain all the code from the QA folder of the GitLab project. To create the GitLab QA image, we can use this command and run it from the root folder of the GitLab QA project. I'm going to pause here as this command would take some time. Okay, now we have the image successfully built and tagged with test Jira. Let's see the test running in Docker on local. I have both the GitLab image and the GitLab QA image with test Jira tag on my local, and I also have set the required environment variables. Let's run this command. This command is going to take some time, so I'm going to pause the video here and we'll come back when this finishes. We are done and both the specs were green. Let's talk about how to run the test on CI to ensure they are green before we can send our MRs for review. We have two MRs, one for GitLab project and the other for the GitLab QA project, and both of them unfortunately won't run the new scenario in the CI pipeline as is. The GitLab MR won't run it because it uses the GitLab QA gem to run the test, and the gem currently does not have the new scenario. The GitLab QA MR won't run the test because although the new scenario and the jobs are there, it uses nightly GitLab QA image, and nightly currently does not have the test. To solve this problem, we would need the GitLab image created by the trigger GitLab Docker job and use it as a release in a new pipeline for the GitLab QA MR. Let's see it happening. We already saw how to fetch the image from the trigger GitLab Docker job earlier, so I'm going to skip that part. I've already fetched it and I have it on my clipboard. I'm going to go to my MR in the GitLab QA project. I'm going to copy the branch name, and I would also need the merge request number. Then I'm going to go to CI/CD pipelines, run pipeline, run the pipeline for my branch, provide a release variable, and the value would be the one that I fetched earlier, and CI merge request IID and this is 451, and run the pipeline. Now we can see a job created for Jira here. It's going to take some time, so I'm going to pause the video here and we'll be back when this completes. And the pipeline just finished running. We can see that the job is green. Let's look at the results. And here we can see both of the examples passed. Once the GitLab QA MR merges, we would need to create a new MR in the GitLab QA project where we would increment the GitLab QA gem version in the version.rb file based on the recommendation from semver.org. And when creating the MR, we would need to use the release template and just follow the instructions in there. We would need to add any new environment variables that the new test scenario introduced at a few different places to be used in different pipelines. I've listed all the places here. Let's look at the first uh, project that we need to add. This is the GitLab QA project. The variable needs to be added in CI/CD settings in the variable section. In our case, the two variables were Jira admin password and the Jira admin username. We also need to add jobs for our test scenario to different pipelines where we need to run the tests. We already added the job to the GitLab QA project as part of our GitLab QA MR. Other places we can add the jobs are the nightly pipeline and the pipeline common project for sanity runs against live environments. And with that, we conclude our session for today. If you have any questions, please reach out to me at the email address shown on your screen right now. Thanks.